We're now started.
So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nick Adams-King. I'm the leader at Hampshire County Council and also the executive member for Hampshire 2050 and Corporate Services. So welcome to my decision day this afternoon. With the exception of consideration of matters which are confidential or exempt, this decision day is currently being broadcast live on YouTube via the County Council website. And so I've got a few people to welcome. My colleague in the Cabinet who helps with 2050 is Councillor Zoe Huggins, and Zoe's here. Councillor Jonathan Glenn, who's the chair of the Hampshire 2050 Select Committee, and the Vice Chair, Councillor Rod Cooper. And our colleagues from, thanks Jonathan, and our colleagues from the opposition parties, Councillor Adrian Collett, who's the principal opposition spokesman for the Liberal Democrats, and Councillor Malcolm Wallace, who is our Green councillor, but also represents the independent group. And we've got one deputy, and that's Mr. Dominy from South West Railway. So he's going to talk to us in the deputation section at the beginning. We did have another deputy registered who was Mr. Jones, and unfortunately Mr. Jones can't attend today due to a family illness. So first thing to say is that we hope that the member of the family that's poorly does get better. Secondly, to thank him for sending in his note, the note of what he would have said. We have read it, and I'll just make a couple of references to it when we get to that section of the agenda where he wanted to talk about public transport policy, which is item number 2. So first thing to do is to let Phil, Mr. Dominy, give us his deputation. He's talking to item 1, which is the rail update and rail station interchange improvement plan. So Phil, you've got 10 minutes to go ahead.
Well, I will keep it brief. But first, I'd like to thank the chair and everyone on the meeting and all the members for the opportunity to speak today. This document, I believe, is the first of its type. And if it's approved today, the plan is that we are going to showcase this across the whole of the South Western Railway and beyond, to show people that this is how you do it. This is how you work together, and this is how you promote integration, sustainable transport. This has come as a result of a really positive partnership that we have with Hampshire. It delivers a forward-thinking plan in terms of integration and sustainable access in and around stations. And we have got many examples of where we've worked well together with all the various Access for All schemes. I've taken the liberty of putting the picture of Totten behind. That's just the latest example. And these have all arisen as a result of opportunities arisen. What this plan and what this document will do is it will take us to the next stage, the next level. So as and when any opportunity arises, whether it's from a developer contribution or government, DFT, the railway, whatever it is, we will have a plan and a proposal that's ready for every single station in Hampshire. So that rather than how often do we get short notice, we've got to do something quick, we'll have something documented in terms of what we want to do for all stations, working with yourselves and others all around the area. And so this basically is going to join up all the dots. It's going to take things forward. There's been a considerable amount of work, as I think you can see in the document, to get to this point. It shows you where we are now, where we're looking to get to, and how we're going to take things forward. So this will make a huge difference for improving integration, the environmental side of things, sustainable side of things, and enable positive activity in and around the station. So thank you very much, and I'd like to commend it to the members. And I'm sorry I haven't gone on for 10 minutes. Yeah. Well, but I could if you want me to.
No. I think that's fine. But Phil, thank you so much. I mean, I think your comments chime very much with the report and are most welcome. And thank you for the cooperation that you've given us in bringing it forward. We'll obviously just move on
Absolute
in a moment
pleasure.
to talk about that. But thanks for coming along. Thanks for taking the time to say that. I think we're planning to come and talk to you as a cabinet in the near future. So we'll do that. Adrian, I know you want to jump in, but what I was going to do is just go straight on to the item and just let Jackie have her say first. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Is that okay? So the first item that we've got is the one that Phil was just talking to, which is the rail update and rail station interchange improvement plan. It's on pages 5 to 136. And I know Jackie wanted to say a few words about it. Do you want, Andrew? Actually, is it easier, Andrew, if you introduce it first and then let Jackie and Adrian have a few words? Is that all right?
That's fine with me, Leader. Yeah, I'm quite happy to run through briefly the main points from the report.
Yeah. So
okay. So the report is split into two sections in effect. One is the rail station interchange improvement plan that Phil has just described. It sets out in effect a shopping list for improvements to access at all of our 48 rail stations in Hampshire, and it seeks approval to adopt that as a supporting document to LTP4. And then the rest of the report it provides an update on the current structure in the rail industry, roles and responsibilities, how those roles and responsibilities may change under the new government, and how Hampshire County Council fits into all of that. So Phil's talked a little bit already about the interchange improvement plan. As he said, it's the first of its kind in the South Western Railway operating area, sets out a clear shopping list for improvements to all of our stations. It's been developed not just with South Western Railway, but we've also worked closely with the other train operating companies, with Network Rail, with Hampshire's community rail partnerships, the district councils and the bus operators as well, in terms of that interchange between bus and rail. So I think it really sets out how Hampshire are really at the forefront of working in partnership with the rail industry on this, and it was very positive to hear Phil's words on that partnership. The remainder of the report briefly talks about the structure and how the new government may well want to change the structure of the railway, how the franchises operate, what the role of Great British Railways may well be. The report also provides a commentary on the impact of the pandemic on passenger numbers and trends over the last 2 years and changes in journey patterns. The report also mentions some major infrastructure projects that potentially affect Hampshire, such as the western access to Heathrow by rail and southern access to Heathrow, and what the latest is on those big significant infrastructure schemes. The report also touches on the Solent Rail connectivity study, which is a piece of work that we're on with Network Rail, with Portsmouth City Council, Southampton City Council, and the other train operating companies, looking at how we improve rail connectivity, improve the frequencies in the Solent area, in and around the two cities and towns like Fareham, Eastleigh and Totton and so on. And then finally, the report covers the Access for All schemes that Phil has touched on. We've recently completed the scheme at Totton Station, and we've got two schemes where we've got feasibility work underway at Hedge End and Swanwick, two of our busiest stations in Hampshire, and Network Rail have started that feasibility work at looking at providing full access at those stations. So lifts between the platform, lifts and a bridge between the platforms there, which would make them fully accessible. They're significant multi-million-pound schemes. So onto the recommendations. What we're asking is for the adoption of the rail station interchange improvement plan, and for you to note the commentary on the local and national rail issues that are ongoing.
Super. Thanks so much, Andrew. Right. So, Jackie, would you like to say a few words, and then Adrian wants to come in as well?
Thank you. I represent the area that includes Mitchell-Dever, so it's not in the top group, it's not even in the second group, it's in the third group, but it's the only transport that some people in that one, only transport that is actually public transport that's available in that village. And I think it highlights the problem that we've got in all of these small ones, where we don't see any hope of getting to the point of the improvements that we all want to see for these villages. So the audit was done in 2022-23. But that is actually unknown to probably many people on this call, not probably possibly even Andrew, that's due to work that's been going on little by little since 2012, adding footways to make it better, making slightly more car parking spaces. I've worked with Phil Dominy since probably about 2010 in his different guises to try and get pieces of work done there. Having to reduce local parking facilities because we have been overwhelmed in the past with local cars using those roads, getting licenses from residents who have lost a little bit of their front garden but have created a footway in front of their properties. And at the moment, we've been working for over a year with, well, in fact, that's the problem. We started the work over a year ago to try and get another footway on one side of the station, because it's unique in the sense that it doesn't have footways to the station from both sides. That work has really gone extremely slowly. It's been led by Hampshire County Council. It's been gone extremely slowly. And Mr. Dominy, Phil was talking about having oven-ready schemes. And what I am worried about is that money gets spent on feasibilities for these things, which doesn't ever materialise. And I know this isn't a unique problem, but I know it is something that is sitting there as a challenge. We've spent a lot of money getting the feasibilities done, but not actually doing the work. So I'm really asking you as an executive member, how we're going to get something that feels reasonable, that delivers, particularly in these rural, very rural stations, which don't have that many people turning up at them, in the hundreds of thousands and possibly not even 100,000. Is it really realistic to be concentrating on them, or should we be concentrating purely on the larger ones? Is it really realistic to be managing disability at those smaller stations when it's been rejected before by South West Trains or whoever, South West Railways? Is it really realistic, or should we be just concentrating on that top 12 or 20?
Okay. So I tell you what I'm going to do. I will answer that, but should we let everybody else have their say first, and then we can perhaps wrap up at the end as a bit of a double act between Andrew and I.
It's a rhetorical question, I suppose, really, but it's also a very real question, long term.
Yeah, I have a view. And thanks to talking to Andrew about it, I think that there is an answer. But let's let everyone else have their say, and then we can come back around. Adrian, you're next.
Thank you, Nick. First of all, to say that I very much welcome this report, and I share the points that Phil Dominy has made about the fact that it lays out a list of opportunities so that when funding comes along or whatever, we now know what we want to do with it. What I'm less happy about is the lack of involvement of local members in putting this together. Blackwater is in my patch. It's one of the second phase of busiest stations. And I read the report and I was really disappointed. Some of the big key issues at Blackwater were just missed altogether. And that's probably true of other railway stations around Hampshire. And I think Jackie's presentation a moment ago illustrates the same point, that as local members, we deal with these things all the time, would have liked to have had an input. That's not in any way failing to recognise that our officers are pulled from pillar to post. There are fewer of them around these days trying to do a lot of work. And this is setting out a document that doesn't necessarily guarantee that anything in it will get done. It's setting out something that we hope there will be opportunities to do in the future. But I just felt it was a missed opportunity.
Super, thanks so much. Malcolm, you're next.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I had about 4 hopefully small points. Firstly, on Winchester Station, there is no mention, and this might tie in with some of Adrian's comments, there's no mention of the bike security issues. Winchester Station, I think last year was ranked neither number 1 or number 2 in the country for the most number of bikes stolen, and that hasn't featured in the report. Botley Station is the other one. Is one in my patch, and like Councillor Porter, I'm concerned about how we focus our funding. Whether smaller stations like Botley get left behind, and we don't. Whether we it's a real good opportunity to improve what we can do out in the countryside. But if all the funding's focused on the larger stations, and smaller stations like Botley will get left behind. Third point was on the Hampshire Community Rail Partnership. That wasn't mentioned in the report, or at least I didn't find it. Now, this is for people who don't know, this is a group of this group is meant to be kind of like a group that sits, but it's a government mandated thing that's meant to sit between, represent the views of locals. So I was surprised it wasn't mentioned. And then the second point was, although the Hampshire Community Rail Partnership exists, it actually doesn't cover all of our stations in Hampshire. It covers quite a lot of them, about 3/4, but it doesn't cover Botley, bizarrely. The final point was Wellbourne. This report talks about all of our current stations. I know there's an aspiration to get a station at Wellbourne. And how does that fit into this whole report? Thank you.
Okay, super, thanks. And right, so I'm sorry, I'm moving on without answering questions, just because we'll come back around in a loop to talk about them all in a moment. But Jonathan.
Thank you, Nick. Yes, I've known Phil Dominy a long time, even from district council days. I just wanted to say that I think, first of all, I'm delighted about this decision being made, and it's endemic upon us to, is that the right word, to really talk about our own stations. We can't help that. Having just spent the whole of the morning telling everybody to stop talking about their patches on the scrutiny committee, I'm going to do exactly that. Okay, it's Hook. This is just the example. When we suddenly get a letter saying, please let us know what improvements you want. And it sounds like you've got 24 hours to do it in. It's a very short space of time. And what we need in Hook is what we call raised platforms. I think it's called the Harrington Hump, because trains are much higher than they used to be. And secondly, we need lifts for the elderly and those who can't walk very well. Now, I've been at this now for about 15 years. And what it needs is the rail people, Phil Dominy and his chums, to give us more warning and to allow us time to contact our parish councils to get buy-in from them, so we can get letters sent out, complete with reports explaining how many old folks' homes are in the area, etc., etc., etc. Because these reports take a bit of time, and that's what I would like to see happen. Now, I don't know if that's going to amend your decision in any way, but it's what we need. And I've spoken to Phil about it in the past, but that's what we really need, is more time and do it more professionally.
Super, thanks. Okay, so let me just check before we come back to the points that everyone's raised. Rod, would you like to contribute anything?
No, having read briefly through the report, it's pretty comprehensive. I do echo the points that local members, it would have been nice if we had had some contact for our opinions to be taken into account.
Okay, super, thanks. And Zoe, anything to add?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think, you know, we've demonstrated here that we all come with experience of travel, whether or not that's through our residents or ourselves here in Hampshire. I found the report really interesting when you look at the statistics, especially maybe some of those stations that I'm not particularly familiar with across Hampshire. I found it really interesting in sort of start to understand people's travel post-COVID and how they're using it, and how some stations have nearly gone back up to where they were pre-COVID. Actually, I think there were some that showed a dip pre-COVID, and sort of understanding that detail. So I think it's really complex and much that we need to grapple with. But for me, I welcome this alongside all the other agenda items that we're discussing today. And there's two main points for this. The one of aspiration, I think, in looking at the connectivity partnership, I think is really important, and accessibility. When we talk about two things of getting ease congestion, people to use public transport, the impact to clean air. but obviously also our economic prosperity, the movement of people and goods is really important. And I think looking at those two pillars, connectivity and accessibility, are vital in that. And, you know, my experience is, you know, for example, you know, when we talk about connectivity and the partnership across the unitaries as well, when we talk about timetabling, new towns, airport connections, there's real simple things, the conversations that we're starting to have that would impact my local economy, for example, and people to use increase public transport. And that is, you know, I cannot get a direct link to Southampton Airport, whether or not that's Fareham Station or Portsmouth Station. I have to go into Eastleigh and then come back into Southampton Parkway. The other for me is timetabling, a simple thing of lining the last train into Portsmouth Harbour with the last ferry across to Gosport. So that's why I mention they're both really important when we talk about use of public transport, easing our congestion, clean air and our economy. And I think connectivity and accessibility are key for that. And I'm really glad that they are the pillar of this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Zoe. So let me make a couple of I think general points or address some of the more general issues that everyone's raised, and then perhaps we can just ask Andrew if you wouldn't mind commenting on some of the more specific points that we talked about. I think I really welcome this report. I think it's a great piece of work, and I think it's a great piece of work, not least because it is also the first time that we've ever done it, and indeed it seems to be the first time that any county council has carried it out anywhere. And so thereby maybe also lies a little bit of vulnerability around it, because you quite rightly have raised some of the questions that say, well, what about these different items? I think the important thing for us to consider is that, number one, we've not done it before. So number two, inevitably there will be some questions around it, but also it needs to be a living document. This is something that will change as time goes along, as developments change, as people's movements change, and as the rail network changes, as this government's got some quite big aspirations for the way in which they're going to change the way they manage it. So, you know, what we need to have is a document that is agile and that can react to those changes, but also has some distinct plans that we can identify for each of those different stations, where we can align their use better with public transport across the county, so that when money becomes available, and you know, I know we quite often get relatively short windows in which to bid for money, but at least we have something that we can now take off the shelf and show people and say, and show government or show whoever is offering us support. This is a plan that we have, and we know it will have a positive impact, and we know that it will work. And it might be that some of that is focused at some of the larger stations. It might be that some of it is focused at some of the smaller and rural stations, as Jackie and Malcolm have highlighted. I can think, funny enough, Jackie Mitchell-Dever is very similar, I think, to one it's not in my patch, it's on the edge of my patch, which is Dunbridge and Watersfont, where there is no pavement. It's in the middle, it's a country lane, basically, and there's virtually no parking and there's no pavement. And so there are, you know, big accessibility issues there. But they're ones, but if we don't have an aspiration to do something about it, if we don't have a plan, when there is something available, when there is funding available, then we wouldn't want to miss out on those opportunities. And I think that's the important thing about this. And I think I certainly hear the point about local member involvement. I think it's something that we can build in, hopefully, as time goes along, as we begin to look at these, and particularly if there is anything that, you know, if there is a plan that comes along that begins to focus on a particular station or a particular station that meets the criteria, then that I think is really useful. I'm not sure whether Phil would remember me from a long time ago, but I got involved with the issue of the Folkestone station lifts when I was in Bournemouth. And that's an issue that has gone on for 20 years, trying to get the lifts kind of fixed and sorted at Folkestone or installed at Folkestone. And so I know that things in the rail industry quite often never move very quickly, but unless we're prepared, then we will never be in the space where we can get any of that support. So I think it's a matter probably of saying that I hear your individual concerns, and I'm very happy that as we take this forward, that we take those into account and that we make sure that they are addressed. But it's better to have this than have nothing at all. The final thing to say is that all of the issues that Zoe has raised are ones that are equally valid and important. And frankly, I think this is the kind of thing where, if we think about devolution, we can think about the kind of benefits devolution will bring. If we can get that over the line, that's where a much more joined up strategic transport offer from a combined authority begins to hopefully give us some real benefit. It's a really good example of what we can do, and having this plan in place already is putting us one step ahead when that time comes. Andrew, did you want to just comment on, if you wouldn't mind, some of the, and I hope that's okay what I just said, but the specific issues about the bike security at Winchester and the community rail partnership involvement that Malcolm raised. They're issues that are quite specific, I think.
Yeah, I can cover those. I'll run through them one by one very briefly. So in terms of Councillor Porter and Mitchell Dever, I know we've got a scheme worked up there. I think we're knocking on the door of any funding opportunities that come forward. It doesn't have to be big funding opportunities. I mean, Access for All at the moment for the two schemes at Swanwick and Hedge End, they're big schemes. They are multi-million-pound schemes that we're working towards. But equally, there are smaller pots of funding. There's you're aware of the communities or customer and communities infrastructure fund, where you bid previously for those improvements at Mitchell Dever, and they haven't come through. But there are other pots as well that come forward, and it doesn't just have to be rail related. BSIP funding through the bus service improvement plan, if there's an element of interchange between bus and rail that it could help facilitate that, then there are other pots. I'm not saying that's the case at Mitchell Dever, but it might be the case elsewhere. But I think now that we've got a kind of an agreed programme at Mitchell Dever, then we've just got to wait for the right funding opportunity to come along. In terms of Councillor Collett and Councillor Cooper as well about the involvement of members, this is, as you said, Leader, this is very much a living document. It's out there now, and certainly if members would like to have either individual meetings or make submissions in writing, whatever, we're more than happy to facilitate that. Councillor Wallace mentioned Botley as well. More than happy to take those ideas on board and build them into the plan. It was never our intention that this would be a one-off standalone document that would sit on the shelf. We'll be constantly updating it. So if there are aspirations there that we can build in from members, more than happy to do that. Bike security, specifically at Winchester, that's one that I can take away with Phil, Domini, and have a look at if there are some specific measures around bike security, whether that's CCTV, whether that's more secure types of lockers. Botley Station, we've mentioned, yeah, I think that's a case again of having the plan ready and the designs ready for when the funding opportunities come along. You mentioned Wellbourne, Councillor Wallace. That's really outside of the scope of this piece of work. I think with Wellbourne there was an initial feasibility study funded by Fareham Borough Council as part of the background planning work for the Wellbourne development. Network Rail did that feasibility study. It would be very expensive, and it would be very difficult to fit into the timetable. But that piece of work is there and it has been done, and it would need a scheme promoter. Councillor Glenn, we're aware of the issues with the platforms and the difference in the height between the platforms and the train foot entrances, if you like, at Hook Station. That's certainly in our thinking, and we've corresponded about that before, and we'll make sure that that's part of the plan. Again, that's going to be expensive. I think we've had some outline quotes probably last year from Network Rail about how to bridge the gap literally there. And then Councillor Huggins, in terms of the connectivity piece of work, you mentioned the link from the east to Southampton Airport Parkway. It's kind of in the mix as part of the Solent Rail connectivity study. One of the options potentially could be to have an additional platform at Eastleigh Station where the trains could come in from the likes of Botley, Hedge End, Fareham, drive into the platform at Eastleigh Station, and then in effect the driver turns around and goes to the other end of the train, and you're in Parkway within a couple of minutes and on to Southampton. That could also facilitate all direct services from the Botley line services into Southampton. So that would be expensive, but it certainly is in our thinking as part of that Solent connectivity study. And I think, Leader, that was probably everything that was mentioned.
The only one was the Community Rail Partnership and their involvement with this.
Yep, the CRPs, we've got several community rail partnerships for the different lines in Hampshire. They did a lot of the initial background work that fed into this report. That we've done some of it ourselves, but a lot of the base data, the surveys, and auditing what is it at the stations at the moment is done with the community rail, was done by the community rail partnerships. We do engage with them well. We attend their meetings. We've worked with them well on for example, at Shawford Station, where the CRP has driven the improvements at Shawford Station. We put some funding in. I'd like to say that we're fully engaged with the CRPs, and it's not something that we ignore at all.
May I come back on that?
Do.
I was just going to ask: is Hampshire doing anything to encourage community rail partnerships across all the train stations in Hampshire? Because it doesn't cover quite all of them. For example, Botley is not covered by the community rail partnerships. Is Hampshire encouraging them to do that?
We work with them, but we don't try and drive them in a particular direction. We know that over the recent years that the CRPs have expanded significantly from when they started on the Chandler's Ford to Romsey and Southampton and Salisbury service, where they started on the Three Rivers, and then they've expanded into East Hampshire. They've gone down into Southampton as well, a number of the Southampton stations, and we know they're expanding, but it's not something that we put funding into anymore. We can certainly, in principle, I think they would be interested in something like adopting Botley Station, but I can't speak on their behalf. We'd have to have that dialogue with them.
Jonathan, just briefly, and we've got quite a lot to get through still.
Yes, I know. So thank you for that, Andrew. It wasn't just about the platform; it was also about the lift. Remember, so please don't forget that.
Okay,
thank you very much.
I think as well. The community rail partnerships do a great job, and certainly where they started is around my patch, around Romsey, and they do some fantastic work there, and they've got some really exciting plans for Romsey Station and work that they want to do there alongside that. I think the thing to remember, Malcolm, is that we're not responsible for them, and so whilst we can encourage them, they're not actually part of our formal kind of structure. But certainly on the basis of putting you in touch with them and getting you involved to get to look at Botley Station, that's something I'm sure that we can do. So I think everyone's had their say. Thanks once again to Phil for coming along, and also Phil, thank you so much for all of the support that you've given us in this. I think it's an excellent piece of work, Andrew, and thank you to you and your team. We are trailblazers with this, and I think the amount of debate that we've had shows how engaged everybody is, because having a much better integrated public transport network inevitably must include the railways, and we quite often forget those when we're talking about things like this. Having a plan like this not only as it gives us the opportunity to point at things when money comes from government, but it also means that we've got something that we can put into local plans as well. So as we plan new development across the county, and when we look at Section 106 and CIL contributions, they're amounts that they're items that we can look to bid for as well. So the recommendations for this are on pages. Just lost my place. They're in paragraphs 2 and 3 on page 5. I'm very happy to approve those. And Andrew, thanks so much. Now, I'm afraid you're still in the crosshairs of this one, because the next one is yours as well. So the next item we've got is the public transport policy update, the bus service improvement plan. Would you like to just give us a quick introduction to this one? And Then
Yeah,
I'll ask everyone to speak.
Yeah, I'll try and keep it brief, given the time. Okay, so the report, again, it's split out into two aspects. One is it sets out the progress that we're making in delivering improvements to bus services and bus infrastructure across the county in partnership with the bus operators and our neighbouring local authorities predominantly through the Bus Service Improvement Plan, or the BSIP. And then we're seeking endorsement for the BSIP to be adopted as a supporting document to LTP4, and for the continuation of the partnership model that we have at the moment with our bus operators, rather than pursuing the franchising model. So those are the two main focus points of the report. So the report talks about some of the improvements that we've delivered over recent years, whether that's the extension to the bus rapid transit route in Gosport, the TCF schemes that we're delivering that are coming to fruition now, the Transforming Cities Fund schemes, I should say. Gosport Interchange opened just a couple of weeks ago. We've opened significant bus priority measures in the Marchwood and Totton area recently, which are really helping those bus services coming in from the waterside communities. The 62 zero emission buses that we won funding towards from DFT in partnership with First Bus and Portsmouth City Council. So I've gone through some of the highlights of what the Bus Service Improvement Plan is delivering. There is a section on the national picture and the new government, and them opening the door to franchising for those authorities that wish to pursue that. The report sets out the County Council's priorities for bus into the future, in the near future. So that's maintaining the £2 fare cap, for example, and requesting stable bus service improvement plan settlements over the next few years, rather than the kind of boom and bust approach of competitive funding. There's a strong focus throughout the report on partnership with our neighbouring local authorities, be that Portsmouth City Council, Southampton, Surrey, where across the border in North East Hampshire with Surrey, where we've got a lot of our main bus corridors go through those areas. They're not Hampshire standalone bus services, so we work closely in partnership with our neighbours. And then the report focuses on how the BSIP is helping the County Council deliver on its wider priorities, such as climate change, supporting the EV sector, public health outcomes, economic growth, creation of new jobs and skills. So that's about it as an introduction, Leader.
No, really helpful, Andrew. Thank you. A great summary. We were going to have Mr. Jones, as I think I mentioned earlier, who was going to say a few words on this as part of a deputation at the beginning. As I said, unfortunately, he can't be here. There were three specific points that he wanted us to just consider. The first was to look at the so he's part of the Bus EP Forum, who are effectively critical friends to us, our scheme, and they were recommending, or he was recommending, that we should look at other shire counties because some of them have had better recovery of bus passenger numbers post-COVID than Hampshire has. I think that's certainly something that I know that we're doing. We are increasingly looking at other areas to see what they're doing well and what can we learn from them. The second was looking at the evidence base for the plan and how that feeds into further studies of demand and so on, particularly when they're looking to interlink with planning authorities. And that's a piece of work, interesting, that we've kicked off quite recently, because in talking to the bus companies, it's become apparent that we could all be doing much better, both the district and borough councils, who are the planning authorities, at the county council, in holding the responsibility for public transport, and the bus companies themselves in working to make sure that we maximise the benefit of money that comes from development around public transport. And the third piece was approving alignment with the LTP4 outcomes for areas, particularly market towns and rural areas, and those that are outside the 45 routes, which are already commercially viable. And that's an ongoing challenge for us all, one that we are not at all blind to, but one that is probably the one that's most financially focused for us, and that thereby lies our challenge in ensuring that we're able to support that. But again, looking elsewhere and looking at different ways by which we can utilise community transport alongside the existing schemes is a good way forward. I think the other thing to say is that the issue of bus franchising has been one that a number of people have raised with me, and it's been really interesting talking to some of my colleagues in neighbouring counties where they have seen it as a real positive. But as the example I would use is Surrey, where in some parts of Surrey, particularly those that are adjoining Greater London, they have bus markets where there are up to 6 different companies competing. Whereas, of course, we in Hampshire have a landscape where we don't really have much competition between the different bus companies, and therefore franchising doesn't necessarily work in the same way, because you need the competition between different companies on routes to be able to do that. And if they don't have the infrastructure of having bus depots and bus installation around it, then the franchising model doesn't really work. And so Andrew and the team have been doing a brilliant piece of work for a number of years now around making sure that that works for us, and given the size and the rural nature of Hampshire, that's something that is a better way forward for us, I think. Right, so Malcolm and Adrian are both only want to say something, but also Jackie had asked to speak. So what I'm going to do is just ask Jackie to speak first, if you'd like to, still, Jackie, as sort of the non-formal member here.
Like previous documents, this is really welcome. It's really useful. It sets the direction of travel, and it sets the view for all of us about the relationship that we have to commercial companies again. And that's the challenge of the commercial companies. So accepting that we do have limited influence, although obviously the county has an influence with the big commercial companies, and you've just mentioned yourself that we have a limited number actually in Hampshire, don't we? And that's one of the challenges. That I'm just asking if we can consider some of these points, which is that buses are really heavy on the road surface itself, and often they may be the cause or contribute to the holes that fall along it. Quite often, I'm sorry, I'm coughing and sucking a cough sweet at the same time. So quite often we have quite heavy damage to those roads along the way. Those roads often need road closures to do the work, which create a problem because road closure creates a change in timetable or no bus at all. So is there a way in which we can help those services? And this problem is actually a frustration to the bus companies as well as to our passengers. Is there any way we can help with those services, that if we are going to have to close a route, that we consider closing more than just doing that little patch, but doing more along that route, so that we hopefully wouldn't have to do it another time? That road closure could possibly pay for itself. So I'm just talking about trying to maintain the reliability of that service, particularly for people that use it often. The second thing is a clear message to people waiting for buses. We so often get a timetable that's just got the line on it, but tells you where that bus, what that time is for that bus is at that time. I'm finding that they're increasingly looking tired, out of date, can't be certain it's the most recent one. It sounds really obvious, but to put on it when it starts, when it's likely to finish, really would help, because actually we have no idea whether we're looking at a service, particularly in the rural areas, whether we're looking at a timetable that is actually up to date or not. And the third thing is that many of the buses do carry pupils. I was on yesterday with about 20 pupils and 2 people that weren't pupils of schools. Can we make sure that those bus timetables, when they're rearranged, actually work well for the pupils at those schools? Because often that's the money that keeps those buses going. So recently, the 86 was stopped. It became the 75 from Andover to Winchester. I think it's a really good service. Really great improvement to the service, but actually it's missed out some people who used to go to Barton Stacey to college, and that probably did contribute to the effectiveness of that service. We don't have any say in that conversation. It's a purely commercial service. One hopes that they'd had conversations with the team at Hampshire, but again, a bit like Adrian, as a local member, you have no vision of that work that's going on. And it would be helpful, because there may be something that we could do to tweak those services just to make them more viable for the bus service that we want, and hopefully reduce our school transport bill as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jackie. So what we're going to do again is just let everyone have their say, and then we'll run back around if that's okay with everything. So Malcolm, you've got your hand up next.
Thank you. Yes, so I am concerned about the impact that some of the recent changes of having on our rural communities. We have guiding principles in the BSIP about improving accessibility and supporting social cohesion. We have policies in the LTP4 which place customers at the heart of public transport system and increase the reach of public transport systems. But at the same time, we seem to be cutting. We are cutting services to our rural areas or our towns and rural communities. So this seems to go against what it is we're trying to achieve with our LTP. So I'm trying to marry up these two, and I'm really struggling. If I look on, for example, page 175 of the report, which highlights that none of the bus improvements since 2021 have helped rural transport, not a single one. And a similar table on page 183 shows that only one of the proposed schemes helps rural transport areas going forward. So even though we've got it as an aim to support our rural transport, we don't seem to be doing anything on it. In fact, we seem to be doing the opposite, which is reducing the services. The cuts that we had to make, that were made last couple of weeks are a testament to that. So that's my main issue. I also wanted to question, there was a nice bit in the rail report that we just talked about integrated transport, about tying in rail and buses. We haven't got the same in the bus improvement plan. There isn't the statement to tie it in with rail. Now, this isn't just semantics. Botley train station, they've just cut one of the buses. There's only one bus service that goes there, and it's awful. But at least it is there. It is, but the service that used to come from Whiteley no longer comes to Botley train station. It no longer goes there, and part of the reason for cutting it was because it didn't have the numbers. But they didn't have part of the reason for it not having the numbers was that it came at the wrong times. It didn't arrive. It arrived after the train had left, and on the way back it left before the train arrived. So nobody caught the bus. So it's been cut, and now we've got no bus service from the south to Botley train station, and there's only one from the Meon Valley, which is a very difficult service, which we've talked about other times, for 49. It's a very, very difficult service, and it is it's very infrequent, and it doesn't go there very much. So it would be really good, one, to see the fact that we try and tie the bus services in with the trains a bit more in our plan, and two, to see the action associated with that. Thank you.
Okay, super, thanks so much. Adrian.
Thank you, Nick. 3 points, if I may. First is to say, to repeat what I said this morning at the Select Committee, that unfortunately our IT world falls apart when your broadband doesn't work, and I've not been able to look at documents over the last 2 or 3 days and still trying to sort out my home broadband. But when I did skim through these papers before it went down, I noticed that in Surrey, they've recovered much better post-COVID in terms of their bus passenger numbers than we'd have in Hampshire. So I wonder, what is it that Surrey are doing right that we're doing wrong? Why have they managed to recover so well? Because the figures there traditionally have been comparable between the two counties per number of journeys made per 100 people and so on. So that's a question. A comment on the franchise issue. I skimmed through the report to see what it said about franchising, and I didn't find very much, and it may be that there is something there and I just didn't see it, just the recommendation that it's not the recommended way forward. But when I heard about the government's proposals on franchises, I didn't think of Surrey, I thought of Reading buses. Reading buses are run by the council, and what they do is they use all the profits from the profitable routes to subsidise the unprofitable ones, and surplus profits they invest in developing new routes. So unlike the rest of the country, where buses are gradually contracting in Reading, they're expanding with no public subsidy, just using the profits from profitable services to make that happen. And it's really exciting to see. So I was hoping that the government's changes would allow us to start looking at doing something like that here in Hampshire. My third point is about the thrust of the way the BSIP is being used and the direction of travel, if I can use that pun, in terms of our bus policy. It seems to me that by focusing on already popular routes, we can achieve some good things. One is we can increase frequency, and through that, we can get more people using the buses, get them away from using cars, and we can help to fight climate change. I recognise all of that. Those are positives, and that's very much how our policy seems to be driven. But there is another side to this, and that is the areas that don't have bus services and desperately need them. And what we're saying is, no, that's a lower priority. Getting the numbers up is our priority. And you know, the statistics then look good. I have a case in my patch that I have liaised with our officers over and frankly feel brushed off. Massive demand for a decent service linking up Fleet, Yateley, Frimley Park Hospital, possibly other areas as well. And a local campaign group called Buses in Fleet have sought expressions of interest from people. If there's such a service existed, would you use it? And the number of people that have come forward and explained how they would want to use such a service is phenomenal. And this is run by someone who is experienced in the bus industry, and he's quite clear that number is more than enough to make that viable. But it gets nowhere because it's not on our priority to develop new routes. Our priority is to get numbers up on existing routes. And it's so frustrating when, you know, the demand is there, the need is there, people are left isolated. And it very much ties in with what Jackie and Malcolm have said about the need for rural services. We're just not doing these things. We're just upping the numbers on our popular routes. And I feel our direction of travel, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it shouldn't be the only eggs in the basket. So I welcome comments on that, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Let me check with everybody else. So, Rod, have you got anything that you'd like to add to this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I'm listening with intent here. There's some very interesting points being made, but nothing to add at this time. And whilst I'm off. I do apologise. In 5 minutes, I'm going to have to leave the meeting.
No, that's okay. Jonathan. Is he still there? He's still in the meeting, but I'm not sure that he's there. Okay, that's fine. And Zoe, any point you'd like to add?
Yeah, just briefly, Chair. My division obviously has been mentioned. We just had the opening of our new bus station. Extremely welcome, and the fact that we're 100% electric, which is fantastic. In the opening, I spoke quite a lot of detail to First Bus senior manager, and I believe actually Gosport has the highest passengers across Hampshire. And I think there could be two reasons for that. One, we don't have a railway station. And two, we were one of the early adopters, obviously, for the walking and cycling improvement plans. And we have quite extensive walking and cycling routes. So I think, you know, we can actually look at Gosport to see what's working there regarding passenger numbers. But again, I think just sort of picking up on that connectivity bit. And when I talk about sort of last train, last ferry, I am talking about Gosport, but I know Malcolm, you referred to sort of the last buses. We have to understand that, you know, this is about connecting our arts and culture community and people travelling on those nights that may go to to visit when we talk about our culture, economy and our arts. And it's really important that we have that connectability. And in Gosport, it's really important that, you know, you could have the last train home from seeing a theatre production in Winchester or in London, but yet actually you don't have your connecting ferry, and then you might not even have your connecting bus. So I think that connectivity part is really important to me. But again, a really welcomed report, and it's in the spirit of the agenda today when we're talking about connectivity and the impact of increasing public transport. Thank you, Chair.
Rukiera. Thanks so much, Zoe. Andrew, can you come back on any of the points that everybody's made? Then I'll try and sum up as well.
Yeah, would you like me to go first, Leader?
Yeah, you go first.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I'll go through them as best I can. Councillor Porter, the roadworks issue. I'm aware of issues at the moment with bus services and some quite long stretches of roadworks in your area. I think that's been that's been raised by Stagecoach as well, and I think that's being dealt with by the executive member for highways and Tim Lawton and Mark Reddy as the managing director of Stagecoach. I think they're coming to some kind of agreement there. That's something we can take back. That's not something I can really respond to in detail today about that coordination of roadworks, but I can certainly take that back and look at how we can build that into the BSIP in the future. It's certainly something that the bus operators would be keen on. Information at the bus stops, we're increasingly putting on real-time information screens at as many stops as we can. We've got around about 600 in the county now. That's the ideal situation that we want to be in, that we've got as much real-time information so people know exactly when the buses are going to arrive. In terms of start and finish dates and tidying up the publicity at the bus stops themselves, Stagecoach are in the process of making significant improvements in that area. They've recruited 2 people recently to do that exact job of improving the state of the information provision at bus stops. So I would look forward to that, and that's partly through the pressure that we've put on them through the enhanced partnership. So that's a good outcome for us that should yield some results. Councillor Wallace, you mentioned rural communities and SP25. I think one thing that probably I need to stress is that the bus service improvement plan is not strictly a Hampshire County Council document alone. It's a partnership. The BSIP is a partnership between the bus operators and the local transport authority. That's how the legislation is set up. So we may want to focus more on rural areas as Hampshire County Council. The funding is needed for that. I think a couple of members have talked about funding rural services, and with the funding pressures that we've got on the local transport budget, it's that really isn't easy at the moment. That's difficult, and the bus operators probably understandably are very focused on their commercial network and the growth of that and getting more passengers on. But it was just to highlight that it is a partnership document that the bus operators have got to be bought into just as much as the county council. And that you talked about the contradiction between the growth agenda of bus passenger numbers and social cohesion, and that's exactly what I've just said. It's that it's 2 different markets, if you like. We've got the real where we've got the good opportunities to grow passenger numbers on the main corridors, where we're seeing lots of investment in places like in Gosport around South Hampshire, around Southampton. We've seen it in the Blackwater Valley from Stagecoach. We've got some new services or extended services in Basingstoke and Andover, where we've got good growth, and that's kind of one aspect. The other is that social cohesion part, which is really difficult because the bus operators, strictly speaking, it's not their duty to try and fund all of that. That's the county council's responsibility, and we've got very limited ability to do that at the moment. So it's difficult, but there are some really good examples. One in Councillor Porter's patch, where we've got the 64 service that runs from Alton through Alsford into Winchester, and that's going great guns, and that's through investment by Stagecoach, and that serves a number of rural communities along that line of route. So what we're doing within the one thing we're doing within the BSIP group is looking at why the 64 has been such a success, and looking at places that are more in your patch, Councillor Wallace, like the 69, which is the Winchester to Fareham service through the more rural areas, and see if we can learn lessons from what worked on the 64. So we are trying to do that to the benefit of communities like Bishop's Waltham and Swanmore and so on. Councillor Collett, in terms of Surrey and their quicker recovery in terms of passenger numbers, I think there are lots of factors there. I think generally across the country, numbers have returned more quickly in more urban areas than rural areas, where we've got a greater percentage of concessionary pass holders. They've been slower to come back to buses than what you might call full fare paying passengers. But certainly we have a good dialogue with Surrey, and we can try and understand what the differences are there. The issue around fleet or buses in fleet, I think the question is whether it is down to the county council, and whether it's the county council's responsibility to trial those new routes. It's a very expensive thing to do. We've engaged very closely with buses in fleet, and they had a representative on our enhanced partnership forum, and he made the case as strongly as he possibly could. What he couldn't get was an operator, despite the operators that he spoke to, couldn't get an operator to take that on a commercial basis, and that really is what it will require. There's got to be a commercial case for the operators to take it on. We wouldn't have the funds to pump prime a brand new service from scratch like that. And that is where it's at the moment, that Stagecoach and others don't believe that there's a commercial case in running that bus service. Councillor Huggins, you talked about the strong bus use in Gosport in your area. I think the proof there is that if you build the infrastructure, put the services in, people will use them. And the Eclipse bus rapid transit route is the prime example of that. And you put in guaranteed almost journey times. You've got high frequency services. It operates from very early in the morning till very late at night, and it's entirely on a commercial basis. We support that with good quality infrastructure. The busway is completely traffic free, although cyclists do use it a lot. They seem to cohabit quite well together. But I think it's the case of you put the infrastructure and the services in, and people will respond, and that's how we're getting the growth, not just on that corridor, but in many of the main bus corridors. And I think that's probably it, Leader. From me, unless there's anything that
I think as usual that was really comprehensive. Andrew, thanks ever so much. That's really helpful. I think to add to a little bit of what you've said in terms of Jackie's point about the roads and utilities and so on, I think that's a really important point. And I've mentioned before that Lulu and Kirsty are bringing forward through universal services the idea of a form of disruption charging, and the idea there will be to bring the bus companies into a group that will include the utility companies to be able to plan better when roads need to be repaired and the impact of that. And that's something that's coming forward hopefully in January that we can begin to talk about. And I think to reassure Adrian about how we talk to Surrey. I mean, I mentioned it earlier when we were talking about franchising, that I talked to Matt, who is my colleague who covers this in Surrey on a sort of fairly regular basis. And his point is exactly that they found it. They found that in the more urban areas or the suburban areas around London, bus use has come back really strongly, but the rural areas still remain a challenge, and that comes back equally then to Malcolm's point about the fact that rural bus transport isn't supported as well as it could be. I completely accept that fact, and I wish it could be supported much more. My first job on the cabinet was to have to cut a number of bus services that ran through my own division, and the reason being that they were costing us up to £45 per passenger per trip. And thereby lies our problem. And there are though points of good practice, and there are new solutions that are coming through that I think give us some hope for the future. where the services were cut in Central Test Valley, the community bus service from Mottisfont and Broughton has stepped in and has really taken off as a consequence. And so there are different ways of operating rather than having very large buses running around rural areas. And if we can learn from that and learn from other parts of the country as well, where it's done much better than perhaps we do here, that thereby lies our hope, I think. But our challenge will always be that they are very expensive to maintain and keep going, and that's the challenge that we have. But again, this is an iterative piece of work that we keep on looking to try and improve as much as we possibly can. So if there are no other comments, I can tell you where the recommendations are. They are in paragraphs 2 to 4 on page 137. Thanks everybody for your debate on this one. Again, it's another one that really engages everybody, and so it was worth us having that conversation. Andrew, thank you so much to you and the team for a brilliant piece of work, and I think a special thanks to Lisa, who I know is leaving us, and it's very sad, but she's going to do a good job in for Portsmouth, and I'm very happy to approve the recommendations. As I said, they're on page 137. Right, still with transport, but a slightly different part of it now. Electric vehicle strategy and policy. That's on pages 209 to 220 of the report, and I think Hayley's going to introduce it for us.
Thank you, Leader. So this paper sets out a vision and the supporting principles for an electric vehicle charging infrastructure strategy for Hampshire. Development of a network of charging infrastructure will support the local transport plan 4. It has a vision of delivering a carbon neutral, resilient and inclusive transport system designed around people and with people. So the proposed EV strategy sets out the County Council's role in coordinating activity around electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and that includes directing use of grant funding from central government. The strategy will be supported by a detailed delivery plan, but that's not a subject that's covered in today's paper. So finally, the paper seeks approval of the draft electric vehicle charging strategy as is set out in paragraphs 25 to 31.
Super, thanks so much, Hayley. The recommendations are in paragraph 2 on page 209. Let me just check with my colleagues whether they would like to say anything. Not sure. Malcolm, far away.
Thank you. It's a good report, important report. Fascinating to see the numbers. Number of EVs expected to grow from 26,000 now to 389,000 by the end of the decade. That's a massive increase. So just one question really was about the principles. There isn't a principle about EV charging prices. Obviously it's a big factor for EV owners. If you can charge it at home, you can charge an EV very cheaply. Commercial chargers are expensive, and they can cost you as much to fill up at a EV charge. You pull up your car at an EV charging point, a commercial EV charging point, as it does to fill up at a petrol station. So you lose the benefits of your cheap charging. So I was wondering if there should be a principle in there around EV charging prices. Because that will be a factor for people as they are deciding whether to switch to an EV.
I think the answer on that one, I'd look to Hayley, but I think the answer on that one is probably that's sort of out with our control, really, in the respect that it is the responsibility of the charging companies to do that, because we're not providing the charging ourselves. This is a strategy document that explains how we'll go about engaging with people to identify where we might wish to allow charging points. The one thing I would say is that I think that the prices are coming down, though. I mean, certainly when I've had to charge my car recently, I've noticed it's been significantly cheaper than it has been in the past. And I suppose the greater degree of competition that's entering the market for public charging is beginning to work that way. So I take your point, but I think that's out with our control, to be honest, Malcolm. if I'm honest with you. Is that, hopefully Hedy agrees.
Yeah, that's correct, Leader. Yeah, as is set out in the strategy, Hampshire's role is very much one of coordination and helping to secure funding and garner support. So we wouldn't control the pricing, unfortunately.
Okay, super. Adrian, do you have any comment to make?
Yeah, just one. I noticed that one of the objectives is to look for charging points in locations, sorry, not in locations that would encourage car use, but in locations where it wouldn't. And I wonder how on earth you make that judgment. What's the thinking behind whether a location would encourage car use or not? I don't know.
Sorry, Henry, I don't know. You have to.
Yeah, do you want me to answer that one? Yeah, it's about it's about where we can provide kind of a range of options. So acknowledging that in some parts of the county, in particular rural areas, you haven't got many options other than to drive, and that's fine. But in locations where there are other options, such as good public transport or really good walking and cycling infrastructure, we don't want to lead to an oversupply of parking, because that might discourage people from using other modes of transport. So it's really about that balance. But if you think that's not clear, I can certainly, no, if the leader would like get that changed.
No, the objective was very clear. I was just interested in the thinking behind it. So what you're saying is, in an area like mine where we have no bus to fleet, you might be willing to encourage charging points, but in an area that has a nice regular bus service, that's less likely to be a place where we put them.
Yeah, it's all about that balance and the mix of modes.
Okay. Thank you.
Super, thanks. Zoe?
No, I just think a couple of things to highlight. I think when we talk about sort of pricing and obviously the affordability of this, I think we need to look at central government for some of that, especially when I look at some of the figures where, and sorry to sort of talk about Gosport again, but effectively we have quite a few charging points, but we are the lowest ownership in Hampshire, but actually we might have more charging points than Fareham. So there's a disparity there, and I'm sure some of that is not necessarily about available charging points. It is about the affordability of some of this, whether or not it is to charge or whether or not it's to purchase an electrical vehicle. So I do think we need to look at central government for that. The other thing I just sort of want to highlight, we had a really excellent, and maybe Jonathan might want to come in on this, we had a really excellent debate at 2050 committee this morning. We're obviously part of this forms our debate regarding energy usage and the work we're doing in partnership with SSEN and wider across the county, so Hampshire and Solent, when we talk about the distribution, demand and usage of energy. So I just want to highlight that because that does form part of this thinking as well.
Super. I think I thought that Gosport actually is probably one of the perfect examples of where we need to, think about this strategy, because your ability to have off-street parking in a lot of central Gosport to be able to charge your car where you to purchase one is one of the challenges, and that might equally be linked to why you've got more charging points than Fareham, where presumably there's most properties probably do have the opportunity to get their car off the road. But yeah, good point. Jonathan, I know you've got to go, but I don't know whether you're still there and want to just jump in.
I am still here. I thought I'd leave it on to the end. I wasn't going to jump in, but I'm very glad that Zoe's mentioned the meeting. There was a good debate on it.
Yeah, super. That's great. Thanks. Well, that you need to get off to your other meeting, so do disappear as you need.
Thanks, Nick. Okay, goodbye, everybody.
That's great. And I think we've got everybody. So. Hayley, thanks so much for all the work on this. The implementation bit is going to be the interesting part of it. The recommendations are in paragraph 2 on page 209, and I'm very happy to approve those. And you're staying with us to talk about Whitehall and Borden transport now. That's on page 2. That's between pages 221 and 328, and the recommendations are in paragraphs 2 and 3 on page 221. Hayley, thanks.
Thanks, Leader. So this paper provides an update on the work that has been undertaken to update the Whitehill and Broughton transport strategy, and it proposes a number of priorities that are to be progressed for further study and eventual delivery. The revised strategy has been developed with lots of stakeholder engagement and member engagement, and it's really been done to reflect the changes to travel patterns and travel behaviour since the development and regeneration has commenced at Whitehill and Broughton, but also to align with the changing national and local transport policy landscape. The paper recognises that there have been high levels of investment already made in this area by Hampshire County Council and our partners, and it notes that further interventions would be funded by developer contributions from the development, and all of that is to ensure that we are supporting the transport needs of local residents.
Super, thanks so much. So, comments. So, Adrian, would you got anything to?
Nothing from me, thank you.
No, thanks. Malcolm, anything from?
No, nothing from me on this one, thank you.
Andy's not told you to say anything on this one, so that's a good sign.
I did reach out to him, but he hasn't come back.
No, okay, super. And Zoe?
No, not from me, Chair.
Thanks. Hayley, great piece of work. Thanks very much. I actually met with Greg Stafford, who's the new local MP, up in Borden last Friday, and we were talking through this. Obviously, the issue with the area is the critical mass of people, and so I know there's an aspiration from a lot of people that want to push forward. Not least Andy Tree, who does a great job as their county councillor of advocating for them. And advocating for better services. The challenge, of course, is that if there aren't the people there to use the services, then there's little point in investing in them until such time as we know that they're going to be sustainable, and we're not just going to be creating an expectation that isn't met. So I completely get that, and it's hopeful that East Hampshire and the developers are cracking on with increasing the amount of building there to build out the houses that are due. So I'm very happy to agree those recommendations. Hayley, thanks so much for all your work on that one. That's brilliant. And Emma, you've been very patient. I'm sorry we've been going on a bit today. But community grant schemes.
Good afternoon, Leader, members and officers. This report considers applications from the Leaders Community Grant Fund scheme, the Rural Communities Fund and the Parish and Town Council Investment Fund. Each of those three schemes were open to applications for a fixed window between the beginning of June and the end of August this year. Paragraph 13 on page 331 sets out the eligible applications, the amounts recommended for award, and appendices 1 to 4 set this out in more detail, including recommended conditions. I don't propose to go through the individual awards. I know you've reviewed these in a great deal of detail. However, I am very happy to answer any questions on any individual application. And just to say, the report also considers a recommendation for an award to the Hampshire Association of Local Councils for £51,300 for this financial year. And this is the final award recommended to HALC under the current partnership agreement. So unless you have any questions, I would direct you to the recommendations at paragraph 3 on page 329 of your papers.
Super. Thanks so much, Emma. We have indeed gone through these in quite a bit of detail and talked through them individually, and there are some great projects included in this. This is, of course, one of the grant areas that we agreed not to continue from April of next year. So this will be the last award that we give of these grants. Adrian, got your hand up first.
Yes, thank you. Two things. One is to declare a non-pecuniary interest in the first applicant on page 347, which is Yateley Town Council and the Parish Town Council Investment Fund. I have been involved in advising the Town Council on their approach to this. Although this site is actually in Councillor Davis's patch, so he's listed as local member, it's something we both support. But I don't have any further interest in it than that. The broader point is that the logic of the change we're making in ceasing these funds was examined very clearly throughout the recent process, and I think we all understand why we're going that way. It seems to me, rather than wait a year and then disappoint a lot of people, I think we should have a proactive campaign to educate parish and town councils that they are not capped in the way districts and counties are, and therefore they could do more of these things for themselves, and we would expect them to do so. And the local members, through their county councillor grants, can sometimes plug gaps on some of the things that are listed under these grant schemes. So really what I'm saying is, let's get on and make that clear to people now, so that we're not just having to say no in a year's time, when people thought things might just carry on as they always had. Those are my 2 points.
It's almost as though you're feeding me the lines. We met with HALC 3 weeks ago, Emma,
right,
and we made that point exactly to them. And I'm going to go talk to their conference in the spring to explain that in a bit more detail. And we're looking at a number of ways by which we can help them get that message out to people, because you're absolutely right. The parish councils can raise the precepts themselves to be able to support some of the schemes that they've looked to us for grants for previously. Malcolm.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think thank you on behalf of Solent Power Chair football team, who put in a request for some funding, and I was lucky enough to go and visit them a few weeks ago and see them in action, and I know that this funding will be very much appreciated by them, and I'm sure it will be by all of the groups that are receiving funding today. So thank you for that.
Yeah, they stood out as one of the really deserving recipients of this, I've got to say, Malcolm. Thanks for that. Zoe, anything to add?
No comments, Chair.
No, that's great. Thanks, Emma. We've been through these and talked to them a lot. I'm really happy to support them all. Thanks to the people that have put the grants in for all the good work they do in their communities. So all of those happy to approve. And so we're on to the next item, which is Laura, and we're talking about the Partnership for South Hampshire's Inter-Authority Agreement for Local Nutrient Fund Projects. I know a lot about this.
Good afternoon, Leader.
Oh, sorry, it's Gary.
I'm not Laura McCulloch. Laura's way late this afternoon, so I'm just going to cover this one, and also as the County Council Officer Representative on Partnership for South Hampshire. You'll see it's a fairly straightforward report, Leader, which is referencing the recently created Local Nutrient Mitigation Fund under the governance of Partnership for South Hampshire, and it's the authority for myself to conclude the activity that is required to enter into the adjustments to the inter-authority agreement. The one important thing, Leader, to draw your attention to is paragraph 11 in the report, which references, with advice from our legal and finance colleagues, that there are no financial obligations on the County Council's signatory to the inter-authority agreement unless it becomes a benefiting party. So it will be a conscious choice we would need to make to accept any risk or future liability as a member of that inter-authority agreement. So nothing further from me, Leader, beyond referring you back to recommendation paragraph 1.
Super, thanks so much, Gary. Yes, I've been a member of Partnership for South Hampshire for more years than I like to remember now, I think 7 or 8. And so the solutions that we've come to resolve the nutrient neutrality issue have been, I think, innovative, and this is part of the conclusion of all of that work. Adrian?
Support the recommendation, Chairman.
Yeah, super, thanks. Malcolm?
Yeah, no further comment from me. Thank you.
No. And Zoe?
No, Chair, no comments.
All good. So, I mean, very happy to support that. Thanks, Gary, and approve that recommendation. So the next item, item 7, actually is one where I need to declare an interest. It's a non-pecuniary one, but I remain a cabinet member in Test Valley for the time being, where I'm responsible for strategic partnerships and regeneration in the south of the borough. So I'm going to step out of making this decision and ask Zoe to oversee it and take it for me. So Zoe, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report is the Andover Western Avenue, and I'm most probably going to look to Gary. Is it yourself introducing the report? Because I don't think David is on the call.
No, I'm going to. So
okay, excellent. David.
Okay. This report provides an update on Western Avenue in Andover and seeks approval for a highway scheme that closes part of the southbound Western Avenue to create a linear park, which is part of a wider regeneration project in the town centre funded through Levelling Up funding. This scheme is supported by Test Valley Borough Council, who are acting as the scheme promoter and who also acknowledge the potential for disruption and congestion in the town as a result of these works. And that's it.
Thank you, Natalie. Adrian, Malcolm, any comments?
No comments from me.
Yeah, comment from me. Further to our discussion this morning at the 2050 committee, climate change impact assessment. There's a token reference to it in this report, but obviously changing the road layouts and stuff, there will be climate change impact assessment. There will be stuff, and it doesn't appear to be included in this report. Either the embedded carbon involved in doing the work or the ongoing impact. And I don't know. I mean, obviously, the embedded carbon is likely to be a bad thing. There's for the work. Ongoing carbon, I'm not clear of whether it's going to be an improvement or a reduction, but it doesn't appear to. I would expect a bit more than what we're seeing in the report.
I am going to go to Gary first.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. And yeah, absolutely a case in point of what we discussed this morning at Select Committee. What I can reassure is in terms of those paragraphs around carbon mitigation, it's been looked at through the lens of LTP4 in terms of our new transport policy shaping the future scheme development. So you'll see reference in terms of the overall emphasis of the scheme, promoting modal shift, promoting cycling and walking, and actually taking steps to reduce road capacity within Andover Town Centre, which both from an air quality perspective, but also a carbon perspective is a good thing. What I've not got to hand at the moment is the wider impact in terms of, you said, the stored carbon that would be required as part of the carbon that would be expended to enable the works. My understanding is that would be developed as the scheme goes through the various kind of development phases, but it's not information I have to hand at the moment.
I wasn't expecting you to have reacted in the hour between this morning's meeting and this afternoon's, but I think this might be a good example of one where perhaps going forward we should expect to see perhaps a little bit more in our reports. Thank you.
I think, Malcolm, we noted that this morning, and it's something I can take forward with officers of how we balance in that in the cross-cutting reports. But do we have any further comments? Otherwise, there's the Highways Authority for the decision before us. So the 6 recommendations on page 373 to 374, paragraphs 3 to 8, I'm happy to approve. And back to you, Chair.
Thanks so much, Zoe. So that's taken us through all of the public part of the meeting. So if you're watching online, thank you for bearing with us. Well, I think it's been an interesting and a good debate around many of the transport issues we've been talking about. We are now going to have one more item that we need to consider, and that, though, is an exempt one. So let me read the exemption statement, which is that the public should be excluded from this decision day during the following item of business, as it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during this item, there would be disclosure to them of exempt information within paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, and further that in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemptions outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information for the reasons set out in the report. So thank you for watching. And we're going to say goodbye to you if you're watching online, and we've got one more item to cover. So could we please stop the recording?